The sound of glass shattering against the saloon wall silenced the rowdy crowd as Katherine Zimmerman stumbled backward, blood trickling from her split lip. 3 men loomed over her, their faces contorted with drunken rage, while the other patrons of the Dusty Trail Saloon either looked away or watched with morbid fascination. "I told you we don't take kindly to your type around here," growled the largest of the men, his whiskey breath hot on Katherine's face as he grabbed her by the collar of her dress. Katherine tried to wrench herself free, her green eyes flashing with defiance despite the fear that coursed through her veins. "I have as much right to be here as anyone else," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. The second man, a wiry fellow with a pockmarked face, laughed cruelly. "Rights. A woman traveling alone ain't got no rights in Copper Creek." The third blow came without warning, a backhanded strike that sent Katherine crashing into a table. Pain exploded across her cheekbone, and she tasted copper as fresh blood filled her mouth. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the distinctive click of a revolver being cocked. "That's enough." The voice was low and steady, carrying an unmistakable threat. Katherine blinked through her tears to see a tall man standing at the entrance of the saloon, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat, but his gun gleaming clearly in the lamplight. His stance was casual, but something about the way he held himself spoke of coiled tension, like a mountain lion preparing to strike. "This ain't your business, stranger," the largest attacker spat, though Katherine noticed his hand had instinctively moved away from her. "I'm making it my business." The stranger took a step forward, and the crowd parted for him like water. "The lady's coming with me. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with Mr. Colt here." The 3 men exchanged glances, measuring their odds. The stranger's eyes never wavered, and his gun hand remained perfectly steady. After what felt like an eternity, the leader of the 3 shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. "She ain't worth the trouble anyhow." With surprising gentleness, the stranger helped Katherine to her feet, keeping his gun trained on her attackers. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Katherine nodded, though her legs felt like water. "Yes," she whispered. "Then let's get you out of here." With his free arm supporting her, they made their way toward the door. Nobody moved to stop them. Just before they stepped outside into the cool night air, Katherine heard the largest attacker mutter, "This ain't over, Beck." So that was his name, Beck, her rescuer. The last thing Katherine saw before the saloon doors swung shut behind them was the hateful stares of the men who had assaulted her, their eyes promising revenge. The night air of Copper Creek felt blessedly cool against Katherine's bruised face. The stranger Beck holstered his revolver once they were a safe distance from the saloon. Under the glow of the street lamps, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a piercing blue that seemed to catch the moonlight, and a day's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. He couldn't have been more than 35. "Thank you," Katherine said, wincing as she dabbed at her split lip with her handkerchief. "Those men would have—" "Don't mention it," Beck interrupted gruffly. "No man worth his salt stands by while a woman's being beaten." He glanced back toward the saloon. Though picking a fight with the Hanson brothers wasn't the smartest move, they practically run this town. Katherine straightened her spine. "I didn't pick a fight with anyone, I merely asked for a room for the night. When they realized I was traveling alone, they decided to teach me a lesson," Beck frowned. "You're new in town," arrived on the afternoon stage, Katherine confirmed. "I'm looking for work." "What kind of work brings a woman like you to a place like Copper Creek? It's 1878, madam. There are plenty of more civilized towns." "A woman like me," Katherine repeated, a hint of steel entering her voice despite her injuries. "And what kind of woman do you think I am, mister?" "Beck, Brayden Beck Parnell. Most folks just call me Beck." He had the grace to look slightly abashed, "and I didn't mean any offense. It's just that Copper Creek isn't exactly known for its hospitality toward newcomers, especially women on their own." "I'm beginning to realize that," Katherine said dryly. She swayed slightly, and Beck's strong hand immediately steadied her. "You need a doctor," he decided. "And a safe place to stay. The Hansons will be looking for both of us once they've had enough liquid courage." Katherine wanted to protest that she could take care of herself, but the throbbing pain in her face and the dizziness that threatened to overcome her made a lie of that particular pride. "I don't have much money," she admitted. A hint of a smile softened Beck's rugged features. "I wasn't planning to charge you, Miss Zimmerman, Katherine Zimmerman." She hesitated, then added, "My friends call me Kate." "Well, Miss Zimmerman, my ranch is about 3 miles outside town. It's not fancy, but you'll be safe there while you heal up. Then we can figure out what to do with you." Under normal circumstances, Katherine would never have considered going off alone with a strange man to his isolated ranch. But the circumstances were anything but normal, and something in Beck's straightforward gaze told her she could trust him. "Lead the way, Mr. Parnell." Beck's horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion with a white blaze, stood patiently outside the saloon. With gentle hands, Beck helped Katherine into the saddle before swinging up behind her. "Hold on," he murmured, reaching around her to grasp the reins. As they rode out of town, Katherine leaned back against Beck's solid chest, too exhausted and in pain to maintain her usual rigid independence. The steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the warmth of the man behind her lulled her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. "What brought you to Copper Creek?" Beck asked after they'd been riding for some time. "The truth, if you please," Katherine sighed. In her experience, the truth rarely did her any favors, but this man had risked his life for her, and she owed him at least that much. "I'm a teacher," she said. "Or I was. I saw an advertisement in a Denver newspaper seeking a schoolteacher for Copper Creek. It promised good pay and accommodations." Beck was silent for a long moment. "There's no school in Copper Creek," he finally said. "Not anymore." A cold weight settled in Katherine's stomach. "I suspected as much when I arrived, and no one seemed to know anything about the position. I thought perhaps there had been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Beck said grimly. "Just a trap. The Hanson brothers and their friends have been known to import women under false pretenses." Katherine shuddered. "For what purpose?" Beck's arms tightened slightly around her as if in protective instinct. "What do you think, Miss Zimmerman? There are mining camps all around these parts. Men get lonely. Women can be profitable." "Dear God," Katherine whispered, the full horror of her situation dawning on her. Had she not stood up to the men in the saloon, had Beck not intervened, she might have been forced into a life of degradation and despair. "Then I owe you even more than I realized." "You don't owe me anything," Beck said firmly, "but you should know you've made some dangerous enemies. The Hansons won't take kindly to having their plans disrupted." They crested a small hill, and in the moonlight, Katherine could see a modest ranch house nestled in a valley below. A barn stood nearby, and several corrals housed shadows that must have been horses. It wasn't large, but everything about it spoke of care and hard work. "Welcome to Parnell Ranch," Beck said. "It's not much, but it's home." As they approached, a door opened, spilling warm light into the yard. A figure stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand. "That you, Beck?" called a woman's voice, sharp with worry. "It's me, Martha. Put that scattergun away before you hurt someone." The woman lowered the shotgun as Beck dismounted and helped Katherine down. Now that they were closer, Katherine could see that Martha was an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Who's this?" Martha demanded, taking in Katherine's battered appearance. "Miss Katherine Zimmerman." She had some trouble in town. "Miss Zimmerman, this is Martha Wells, my housekeeper and the closest thing to a mother I've had since I was 12. Martha's expression softened slightly. "Hansons?" she asked Beck. He nodded. Martha sighed. "Bring her inside, I'll fetch my medicine box." The interior of the ranch house was plain but comfortable. A large fireplace dominated the main room, with a worn sofa and several armchairs arranged around it. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprisingly well stocked for a remote ranch. The floors were wooden, covered here and there with hand-woven rugs and kerosene lamps cast a warm glow over everything. Beck guided Katherine to the sofa. "Martha's something of a healer," he explained. "Learned from her Cheyenne mother, she'll have you fixed up in no time." Martha returned with a wooden box and a basin of water. With practiced hands, she began cleaning Katherine's wounds, her touch gentle despite her stern demeanor. "You've got a nasty cut here," Martha said, probing Katherine's cheekbone. "And that eye's going to be swollen shut by morning." "But nothing's broken, as far as I can tell." "Thank you," Katherine said, wincing as Martha applied a stinging salve to her lip. "Don't thank me yet," Martha said gruffly. "Those Hanson boys won't forget this slight. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, both of you." Beck, who had been standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, nodded grimly. "I know, but what was I supposed to do? Let them beat her senseless," Martha snorted. "Of course not. I raised you better than that. I'm just saying we need to be prepared for trouble." She turned back to Katherine. "You'll stay here tonight. I've got a spare room made up. In the morning, we'll figure out what to do with you." Despite Martha's brusque manner, Katherine detected genuine concern beneath the surface. "I don't want to be a burden," she began. "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "No woman traveling alone is safe in Copper Creek, especially not one who's crossed the Hansons. Now, are you hungry? There's stew keeping warm on the stove." Before Katherine could answer, her stomach growled audibly. She realized she hadn't eaten since a hasty breakfast on the stagecoach. Beck laughed, the sound transforming his stern face. "I'd take that as a yes, Martha." As Martha bustled off to the kitchen, Beck took a seat in an armchair across from Katherine. "Don't mind her. Martha's bark is worse than her bite. She seems formidable, that she is. Raised me after my folks died in a cholera outbreak, taught me everything I know about ranching, doctoring, and standing up for what's right." He studied Katherine with those piercing blue eyes. "What about you? You said you were a teacher," Katherine nodded, grateful for the change in subject. "In St. Louis, for 3 years after finishing my education." St. Louis to Copper Creek is quite a change. What happened? Katherine hesitated. Her past wasn't something she discussed with strangers, even strangers who had saved her life. But there was something about Beck's direct gaze that made evasion seem pointless. "The school closed," she said simply. "Budget constraints," they said, but the truth was that the new headmaster didn't approve of my teaching methods. Beck raised an eyebrow, too progressive. "I taught the girls mathematics and science along with the boys," Katherine said. "And I included history that wasn't in the approved textbooks, stories of native peoples, of women pioneers." She shrugged. "It wasn't popular with some of the parents or the school board." Before Beck could respond, Martha returned with a tray bearing 3 bowls of fragrant stew and a loaf of fresh bread. "Eat," she commanded. "Then rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." The stew was delicious, rich with beef and vegetables. Katherine hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the clink of spoons against bowls. "What will you do now?" Beck asked eventually, with the teaching position being non-existent. Katherine set down her empty bowl. "I don't know," she admitted. "I spent nearly everything I had on the stagecoach ticket. I suppose I'll have to find work of some kind, at least until I can save enough to move on." Martha and Beck exchanged a look that Katherine couldn't interpret. "There's no decent work for a single woman in Copper Creek," Martha said bluntly. "Not unless you want to wash minors' clothes or serve drinks to men like the Hansons." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Katherine said, a touch of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Nobody's saying you are," Beck said quickly, "but Martha's right about the options in town." "What about here?" Martha asked suddenly, looking at Beck. "You were just saying last week how the accounts are in disarray since Tommy left. And haven't you been talking about wanting to expand the horse breeding operation? You need help, Beck." Beck looked startled. "Martha, Miss Zimmerman is a teacher, not a ranch hand or a bookkeeper." "I can do both," Katherine interjected, sitting up straighter despite the pain it caused. My father was a banker. He taught me bookkeeping from the time I was old enough to add figures, and I'm a fast learner. Beck looked skeptical. Ranch work is hard, Miss Zimmerman, and not exactly suited to a lady of your background. Katherine's eyes flashed. Mr. Parnell, in the past 24 hours, I have discovered that I was lured to this town under false pretenses, been assaulted by 3 men, and nearly forced into prostitution. I think I can handle a bit of mud and manure. There was a moment of silence, and then Beck threw back his head and laughed. It was a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the room. Fair enough, Miss Zimmerman, fair enough. He glanced at Martha, who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. We can discuss the details in the morning. For now, you should rest. Martha showed Katherine to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. A patchwork quilt covered the narrow bed, and a washstand in the corner held a basin and pitcher of fresh water. There's a nightgown on the bed, Martha said. Might be a bit large, it was mine when I was younger, but it'll do for tonight. Bathroom's down the hall if you need it. She hesitated, then added gruffly, You did well, standing up to those men, most wouldn't have. Thank you, Katherine said, touched by the unexpected praise, and thank you for your hospitality. Martha waved away her thanks. Get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch. Left alone, Katherine slowly undressed, wincing at each movement. The mirror above the washstand revealed the extent of her injuries. A swollen lip, a darkening bruise on her cheekbone, and various smaller cuts and abrasions. She looked like she'd been through a war, in a way she supposed she had. A war for her own dignity and freedom, one that she might have lost without Beck Parnell's intervention. As she climbed into bed, Katherine wondered what the morning would bring. She had come to Copper Creek seeking a new beginning, a chance to use her skills and education. Instead, she had found danger and violence, but also, perhaps, unexpected allies. With the distant sound of Beck and Martha's voices murmuring in the main room, Katherine drifted into an exhausted sleep. True to Martha's word, morning came early at Parnell Ranch. Katherine awoke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting through the house. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, she forgot the events of the previous evening. Then she tried to sit up, and the pain in her bruised body brought everything rushing back. A soft knock at the door preceded Martha's entrance. The older woman carried a tray with coffee, a plate of eggs and bacon, and a small jar of what looked like the same salve she had applied to Katherine's wounds the night before. Thought you might want to eat in here this morning, Martha said, setting the tray on a small table near the bed. You took quite a beating last night. I've had worse, Katherine said automatically, then, seeing Martha's sharp look, amended, but thank you for breakfast. It smells wonderful. Martha handed her a small mirror. Your eyes swollen, just as I expected. The salve will help with that and the cut on your cheek. Apply it 3 times a day. Katherine examined her reflection with a grimace. Her right eye was indeed swollen, a dark purple bruise spreading across her cheekbone. Her lip was split but had stopped bleeding, and there were several smaller bruises visible on her neck where one of the men had grabbed her. I look like I lost a fight with a train, she muttered. Martha's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. You should see the other fellow. Beck said you got in a few good hits before things went south. Katherine couldn't help but smile at that, though it pulled painfully at her split lip. My father always said a lady should know how to defend herself. Smart man, your father. Martha handed Katherine a bundle of clothing. These were mine when I was younger and slimmer. They'll do until we can get your things from town. Katherine suddenly realized that in the chaos of the previous night, she had left her carpetbag at the stagecoach office. My luggage, Beck's gone to retrieve it, Martha said. He left at dawn. A flutter of anxiety went through Katherine. Is that safe, after what happened? Beck can handle himself, Martha said confidently. And the Hansons rarely rise before noon, too much whiskey. Katherine nodded, though she wasn't entirely reassured. Will you really consider letting me work here? I meant what I said last night. I'm a quick learner and I'm not afraid of hard work. Martha studied her for a long moment. It's not my decision, this is Beck's ranch. But for what it's worth, I think you've got spine. That counts for something around here. After breakfast and a careful washing up, Katherine changed into the clothes Martha had provided. A simple brown skirt, a white blouse, and a sturdy pair of boots that were only slightly too large. The clothes were plain but clean and well made. Katherine felt more like herself once she was dressed, despite her injuries. She found Martha in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with strong, capable hands. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Katherine asked, hovering in the doorway. Martha looked up, flour dusting her forearms. "Can you cook?" "Basic things," Katherine admitted. "Nothing fancy." What about mending, sewing?" "I'm quite proficient at both. I used to make most of my own clothes." Martha nodded approvingly. "Good skills to have on a ranch." "Too many young women these days can't even thread a needle." She gestured toward the window. "For now, why don't you familiarize yourself with the place? Might as well know what you're getting into if you're serious about staying." Outside, the morning sun illuminated what Katherine had only glimpsed in moonlight the night before. Parnell Ranch was larger than she had initially thought, not one of the vast cattle operations that dominated parts of the West, but substantial nonetheless. The main house sat in a shallow valley, sheltered by hills on three sides. A large barn stood nearby, along with several smaller outbuildings. Corrals and pastures spread out from there, and in the distance, she could see a small herd of horses grazing peacefully. The beauty of the place caught her by surprise. Wildflowers dotted the hillsides, and a small stream wound its way through the property. The air was clean and crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains. As Katherine walked toward the barn, a large dog bounded up to her, some mix of shepherd and hound, with intelligent eyes and a wary demeanor. It stopped a few feet away, regarding her suspiciously. "Hello there," Katherine said softly, extending her hand palm down for the dog to sniff. "I'm Katherine." The dog cautiously approached, sniffed her hand, and then, apparently deciding she posed no threat, wagged its tail and pushed its head under her palm. "I see you've met Ranger," said a voice behind her. Katherine turned to find Beck dismounting from his horse, her carpetbag slung over his shoulder. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with that weathered, handsome face that spoke of a life lived outdoors. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and his blue eyes were even more striking in the sunlight. "He seems friendly," Katherine said, scratching behind Ranger's ears. "He is, once he decides you belong here." Beck handed her the carpetbag. "Your belongings, Miss Zimmerman, and some news from town." Katherine accepted the bag, clutching it to her chest like a shield. "What kind of news?" Beck's expression was grim. "The Hansons are telling anyone who'll listen that you're a thief who stole from them and that I'm harboring you." "Sheriff's not likely to do anything. He knows what the Hansons are, but it means going back to town wouldn't be wise, at least not for a while." Katherine's heart sank. "So I truly am trapped here." "Not trapped," Beck corrected. "Under my protection, there's a difference." He hesitated, then added, "Martha tells me you're still interested in working here." "I am," Katherine said firmly. "I need the work, and from what I saw in town, my options are limited." Beck studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "It won't be easy. The work is hard, the hours are long, and the pay isn't much, but you'll have a roof over your head, food on the table, and no one will lay a hand on you." "That's more than many can say," Katherine pointed out. "What exactly would my duties entail?" "Bookkeeping, for starters." "I breed and train horses primarily, though I run some cattle too. The paperwork's gotten away from me since my last ranch hand left." He gestured toward the barn. "Come on, I'll show you around and we can discuss the details." The interior of the barn was cool and dim after the bright sunlight. It smelled of hay, leather, and horses, not unpleasant, Katherine found to her surprise. Several stalls lined each side, most occupied by magnificent horses that peered curiously at them as they passed. "These are primarily quarter horses," Beck explained. "Fast, smart, and good with cattle." I breed and train them for ranchers, lawmen, and the occasional wealthy Easterner looking for Western adventure." His pride in the animals was evident in his voice. He stopped at one stall where a beautiful Palomino mare was contentedly munching hay. "This is Sunflower. She's expecting a foal in the spring, one of my best brood mares." Katherine approached the stall cautiously. The mare looked up, ears pricked forward with interest. "She's beautiful," Katherine said softly. "May I?" Beck nodded, and Katherine extended her hand to the horse, who sniffed it thoroughly before allowing Katherine to stroke her golden neck. "She likes you," Beck observed. "Sunflower's usually wary of strangers." "I've always had a way with animals," Katherine said. "My father kept horses in St. Louis. Nothing as fine as these, but I learned to ride when I was young." "That's good. You'll need to be comfortable on horseback if you're going to work here." They continued through the barn, Beck pointing out various aspects of the operation: the tack room, the feed storage, the small office where the ranch records were kept. The latter was indeed in a state of disarray, with papers piled haphazardly on every surface. "As you can see," Beck said ruefully, "bookkeeping isn't my strength." "I can fix this," Katherine said, already mentally organizing the chaos. "It will take some time, but I can establish a proper system." Beck looked relieved. "That would be a weight off my shoulders." He hesitated, then added, "There would be other duties too. Helping Martha with the household, perhaps some light ranch work as you learn, nothing too strenuous until you're healed." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Parnell." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it, Miss Zimmerman. But there's no sense in pushing yourself too hard too soon." As they exited the barn, Katherine spotted a small house about 100 yards from the main building. "What's that?" she asked. Beck followed her gaze. "My foreman's cabin, empty at the moment. Frank left last month to get married and start his own spread up north." "So it's just you, Martha, and me?" Katherine asked, suddenly realizing how isolated the ranch was. "And Ranger," Beck added with a slight smile. "Plus Miguel and Joaquin, 2 brothers who help with the horses. They live in town and ride out each day. Good men, both of them." They walked back toward the main house in companionable silence. Katherine was acutely aware of Beck's presence beside her: his height, his strength, the confidence in his stride. Despite his gruff exterior, there was something undeniably appealing about him. "So," Beck said as they reached the porch, "are you still interested in the position?" Katherine met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I am. The pay's $30 a month plus room and board." It wasn't a fortune, but it was fair, more than fair, considering her circumstances. "When do I start?" Beck smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made Katherine's heart skip a beat. "How about after lunch?" Martha's made her famous rabbit stew, and no one should start work at Parnell Ranch on an empty stomach. Over the next week, Katherine settled into a routine at the ranch. Mornings began early with breakfast prepared by Martha. Then, while Beck and the brothers worked with the horses, Katherine tackled the chaos in the ranch office. It was painstaking work, sorting through years of receipts, bills of sale, and breeding records, but Katherine found it oddly satisfying to bring order to the disorder. Afternoons were devoted to household tasks, helping Martha with cooking, cleaning, and mending. Katherine's bruises began to fade, and with each passing day she found herself growing stronger, more confident in her new role. In the evenings, after dinner, they would gather in the main room. Martha would knit or mend. Beck would read aloud from one of his many books, and Katherine would listen, occasionally asking questions that led to spirited discussions. She discovered that, beneath his rugged exterior, Beck was surprisingly well-read and thoughtful, with opinions on everything from politics to literature. One evening, about 10 days after her arrival, Katherine was helping Martha prepare dinner when Beck entered the kitchen, his expression troubled. "I need to ride into town," he announced. "Miguel brought word that the Hansons have been asking questions about the ranch, about our routines." Martha's hands stilled on the dough she was kneading. "You think they're planning something?" Beck nodded grimly. I need to talk to Sheriff Davis, see what he knows, and pick up some supplies while I'm there. Katherine felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. Is it safe for you to go? Safer than staying here and waiting for trouble to find us, Beck replied. I won't be long back before dark. After Beck left, an uneasy silence fell over the house. Martha was quieter than usual, her movements sharp and efficient as she finished preparing the meal. Katherine tried to focus on her mending, but her mind kept wandering to Beck, imagining confrontations with the Hanson brothers in the dusty streets of Copper Creek. He'll be fine, Martha said abruptly, as if reading Katherine's thoughts. Beck can handle himself. I know, Katherine said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. I feel responsible. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't be at odds with the Hansons. Martha snorted. Beck and the Hansons have been at odds for years. This just gives them another excuse. She set aside her work and fixed Katherine with a penetrating stare. He likes you, you know. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. He's been kind to me, certainly. That's not what I mean, and you know it, Martha said bluntly. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. I know when he's sweet on a woman. Martha, Katherine protested, but the older woman waved away her objection. Don't play coy with me, girl. I've seen the way you look at him too, like he hung the moon and stars. Katherine opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. What was the use? Martha was right. Despite her best efforts to maintain a professional distance, Katherine had found herself increasingly drawn to Beck over the past days. His quiet strength, his intelligence, the gentle way he handled his horses, the respect with which he treated both her and Martha, all of it combined to create a man unlike any she had ever known. It doesn't matter, Katherine said finally. I'm his employee, nothing more. Martha made a skeptical noise but didn't press the issue. Well, employee or not, you're part of this household now, and that means you need to know how to defend it. She disappeared into Beck's room and returned with a shotgun. Ever fired one of these? Katherine eyed the weapon warily. No. Then it's high time you learned. Martha handed her the shotgun. Come on, while the stew's simmering, I'll give you your first lesson. The afternoon passed in a blur of target practice behind the barn. Katherine's shoulder ached from the shotgun's recoil, but by the end of the session, she could hit a can placed on a fence post at 20 paces. It wasn't expert marksmanship, but it was enough to make her feel less helpless. Not bad, Martha acknowledged as they walked back to the house. For a beginner. Coming from Martha, it was high praise indeed. As the sun began to set, Katherine found herself increasingly anxious about Beck's absence. She tried to hide her concern, helping Martha set the table for dinner and keeping up a stream of casual conversation, but her eyes kept drifting to the window, searching the horizon for any sign of his return. When they finally heard the sound of hooves in the yard, Katherine had to restrain herself from rushing to the door. Martha had no such reservations. She grabbed the shotgun and positioned herself on the porch, ready for trouble. It was Beck, but he wasn't alone. Another rider accompanied him, a stranger whose face Katherine couldn't make out in the gathering dusk. It's all right, Beck called out, seeing Martha's defensive stance. He's a friend. As they dismounted, Katherine got her first clear look at the newcomer. He was younger than Beck, perhaps in his late 20s, with sandy hair and a friendly, open face. He wore the star of a deputy sheriff on his vest. Miss Zimmerman, Martha, this is Deputy Tom Riley, Beck introduced as they entered the house. Tom, this is my housekeeper, Martha Wells, and my new bookkeeper, Miss Katherine Zimmerman. Deputy Riley removed his hat and nodded respectfully to both women. Ladies, pleased to make your acquaintance. Tom's here because there's been a development in town, Beck explained, his expression grave. The Hansons are telling anyone who'll listen that they're going to pay us a visit tonight. Sheriff Davis can't arrest them for talking, but he suggested Tom ride out with me as a deterrent. Katherine felt a chill run down her spine. They're coming here, because of me, not just because of you, Beck assured her. Like Martha said, the Hansons and I have history, but yes, they seem particularly fixated on getting you back to town. For what purpose? Katherine asked, though she feared she knew the answer. Beck and Deputy Riley exchanged uncomfortable glances. "There's a new establishment opening in town," Deputy Riley said finally. "A high-class one, or so they claim. The Hansons have invested heavily in it. They need employees." "You mean they need women," Martha said bluntly. "Girls they can trap and force into prostitution." Deputy Riley nodded, his expression apologetic. "Yes, madam, that's about the size of it." Katherine felt sick. "And they want me to be one of these employees." "You're educated, refined," Beck said, his voice tight with anger. "Exactly the type they think would appeal to the wealthier clients they're hoping to attract." "Well, they can't have her," Martha declared, her hand tightening on the shotgun. "Not while I'm breathing." "Nobody's taking anyone," Beck assured her. "That's why Tom's here, to make sure things stay peaceful." They ate dinner under a cloud of tension, the conversation stilted despite Deputy Riley's efforts to lighten the mood with stories from town. After the meal, Beck and Tom positioned themselves on the porch, rifles across their laps, while Martha and Katherine cleared the table. "You should get some rest," Martha told Katherine. "Beck and the deputy can handle watch duty." Katherine shook her head. "I couldn't sleep even if I tried." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I understand, but at least go change into something practical. That skirt won't do you any favors if there's trouble." In her room, Katherine changed into the split riding skirt Martha had altered for her, along with a simple blouse and the sturdy boots. As she was fastening her hair into a practical braid, she heard at the distant sound of hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching at speed. Her heart racing, Katherine hurried back to the main room. Beck and Deputy Riley were already inside, checking their weapons. "They're coming," Beck said grimly. "At least 5 riders, maybe more." "What's the plan?" Katherine asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Tom and I will meet them outside," Beck said. "Martha, you and Miss Zimmerman stay inside, away from the windows. If things go south, there's a trapdoor in the pantry that leads to a root cellar. It's well hidden." "I'm not hiding in any cellar," Martha declared. "This is my home, too." Beck looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "Fine. But keep back unless they actually try to enter the house." Katherine followed Beck to the window, peering cautiously around the edge of the curtain. In the moonlight, she could see riders approaching, 6 of them, led by the largest of the men who had attacked her in the saloon. "That's Elijah Hanson," Beck told her. "The oldest brother. The one with the pockmarked face is Jeremiah and the skinny one is Luke. The others are their cousins and hired guns." Katherine's throat went dry at the sight of her attackers, but she forced down her fear. She wouldn't be a victim again, not tonight. Beck touched her arm gently. "Stay inside, Kate, please." It was the first time he had used her familiar name, and something in his voice, a softness, a concern that went beyond the practical, made her heart skip a beat. "Be careful," she whispered. With a nod, Beck and Deputy Riley stepped outside to meet the approaching riders. From inside, Katherine could hear the conversation clearly through the partially open door. "Evening, Parnell," Elijah Hanson called, his voice carrying a false heartiness. "Quite a welcome committee you've got here." "It's late for social calls, Hanson," Beck replied evenly. "What brings you to my property?" "Just looking to retrieve something that belongs to us," Hanson said. A woman, dark hair, green eyes, answers to Katherine Zimmerman. "Ring any bells?" "Miss Zimmerman doesn't belong to anyone," Deputy Riley interjected. "Least of all you, Hanson." Elijah Hanson spat on the ground. "Stay out of this, Riley. This is between me and Parnell. It became official business when you and your brothers assaulted Miss Zimmerman in town," the deputy countered. "And it'll get even more official if you don't turn around and head home right now." There was a tense silence, broken only by the nervous shifting of horses. "You're making a mistake, Parnell," Hanson said finally. "That woman's worth money to us, a lot of money. We could split it, you and me. No need for things to get ugly." Katherine felt a surge of indignation. How dare they speak of her as if she were livestock to be bartered over? Before she fully realized what she was doing, Katherine had stepped onto the porch, Martha's shotgun in her hands. I am not merchandise to be sold, she declared, her voice ringing clear in the night air. And I am not going anywhere with you, Mr. Hanson. Beck's head whipped around, his expression a mix of anger and admiration. Kate, get back inside. Listen to him, sweetheart, Elijah Hanson called, a cruel smile spreading across his face, before someone gets hurt. The only one at risk of getting hurt is you, Katherine retorted, raising the shotgun to her shoulder the way Martha had taught her. This is private property and you are not welcome here. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elijah Hanson laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Look at that, boys. The school teacher's got herself a scattergun. He shifted in his saddle, his hand drifting toward his holster. But does she know how to use it? Everything happened at once. Hanson went for his gun. Beck shouted a warning. Katherine's finger tightened on the trigger. The roar of the shotgun split the night, and Hanson's hat went flying from his head. In the shocked silence that followed, Katherine worked the action of the shotgun, chambering another round with hands that were remarkably steady. The next one won't be aimed at your hat, she said clearly. For a long moment, Elijah Hanson stared at her, his face a mask of hatred and disbelief. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands away from his weapon. This isn't over, Parnell, he growled. Not by a long shot. I think it is, Deputy Riley said, his own rifle trained on the group. For tonight, at least. Now turn around and head back to town before I arrest the lot of you for trespassing and attempted assault. With murderous glances at Beck and Katherine, the Hansons and their men slowly turned their horses and rode away into the darkness. Only when they were well out of sight did Katherine allow the shotgun to lower. Her arms were trembling now, the delayed reaction to what she had done setting in. Beck was at her side in an instant, gently taking the weapon from her hands. Are you all right? Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. Probably both. I couldn't let them talk about me that way, Katherine said, finding her voice at last. Like I was, property. Beck's eyes held hers, and something passed between them, understanding, respect, and something more. Something deeper that made Katherine's breath catch in her throat. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, Katherine Zimmerman, he said softly. The moment was broken by Martha's triumphant cackle from the doorway. Ha, did you see Hanson's face when his hat went flying? Worth every minute I spent teaching you to shoot, girl. Deputy Riley joined them on the porch, shaking his head in amazement. Miss Zimmerman, I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you are not what I expected when Beck told me about the schoolteacher he'd rescued. Katherine couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the confrontation dissipating. I'm finding, Deputy, that I'm not quite what I expected either. Later, after Deputy Riley had departed with promises to return in the morning to escort Beck into town to file an official report, Katherine sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a shawl against the night's chill. The adrenaline of the evening had left her too wired to sleep, her mind replaying the confrontation over and over. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Beck. Couldn't sleep, he asked, settling beside her on the step. Katherine shook her head. Too much excitement, I suppose. They sat in companionable silence for a time, gazing up at the stars that carpeted the vast western sky. I've been thinking, Beck said finally. After what happened tonight, the Hansons will be even more determined to cause trouble. It might be safer for you to move on. I have friends in Denver who could help you find a teaching position. Katherine felt a pang at the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Beck. Are you trying to get rid of me, Mr. Parnell? No, he said quickly. God knows no. You've done more for this place in 2 weeks than most could do in a year. The books are finally in order. Martha smiles more than I can remember, and he hesitated. And I've grown accustomed to having you here, but your safety matters more than my convenience. What about what I want? Katherine asked quietly. Beck turned to look at her, his face half in shadow, half illuminated by the moonlight. What do you want, Kate? To stay, she said simply. To continue the work I've started here, to see what becomes of Parnell Ranch and its owner. Something kindled in Beck's eyes, a warmth that had nothing to do with the mild night. It could be dangerous. Life is dangerous, Beck, especially for a woman alone in this world. Katherine smiled slightly. But I'm finding that I'm rather good at facing danger, particularly with a shotgun in my hands. A reluctant smile tugged at Beck's mouth. You certainly made an impression on Elijah Hansen. Good. Perhaps he'll think twice before treating another woman as property to be traded. Beck's smile faded, his expression growing serious. Kate, there's something I need to tell you about why the Hansens and I have been at odds for years. Katherine waited, sensing that whatever he was about to reveal was important to him. I had a sister, Beck said, his voice low. Emma. Younger than me by 6 years. Beautiful, smart, full of life. After our parents died, I did my best to raise her right with Martha's help, but when Emma was 17, she caught Elijah Hansen's eye. A cold dread settled in Katherine's stomach. What happened? What always happens when a Hansen wants something, Beck said bitterly. He took it, courted her with gifts and promises, turned her head with talk of traveling, seeing the world beyond Copper Creek. He paused, his hands clenching into fists. I warned her. Martha warned her. But Emma was young, rebellious. She ran off with him one night. Katherine placed a gentle hand on his arm. Beck, you don't have to know you need to know, he insisted. 6 months later she came back, or what was left of her, thin as a rail, bruised, her spirit broken. Turns out Elijah's traveling meant taking her to one mining camp after another where he sold her services to the highest bidders. Katherine felt sick. Oh, Beck. She died 3 days after coming home, he continued, his voice hollow with old grief. Fever took her. But it was Elijah Hansen who killed her, as surely as if he'd put a bullet in her heart. Did you go to the law? Katherine asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Beck laughed mirthlessly. The sheriff back then was in the Hansens' pocket. Said Emma went willingly, that there was no crime in a husband disciplining his wife. Husband? Katherine echoed, shocked. They weren't really married. Elijah had some drifter pose as a preacher, perform a fake ceremony, just another of his lies. Beck took a deep breath. After Emma died, I wanted to kill him. Would have if Martha hadn't stopped me. She said Emma wouldn't want me to hang for murder, that the best revenge would be to live well, to build something lasting that would stand as a testament to Emma's memory. So you built this ranch, Katherine said softly. Beck nodded. And I made sure everyone in the territory knew what kind of men the Hansens were. It's cost them over the years. Respectable businesses won't deal with them. Decent women won't marry into the family. That's why they're so desperate to make this new high-class establishment work. It's their chance to gain some legitimacy, some respectability. And I threatened that, Katherine realized, by refusing to be part of it, by exposing their scheme. Yes, but it's more than that now. Beck turned to face her fully. When they saw me defend you, when they realized you were staying here at the ranch, it became personal. In their minds, I've stolen from them again, just as they believe I stole their reputation after Emma. Katherine absorbed this, understanding at last the depth of the hatred between Beck and the Hansens. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. It can't have been easy to speak of. Beck covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and reassuring. I wanted you to understand what we're up against. The Hansens don't forgive and they don't forget. Tonight was just the beginning. Then we'll face what comes together, Katherine said firmly. I'm not leaving, Beck, not unless you truly want me to go. His fingers tightened around hers. I don't want you to go, Kate. God help me, but I don't. In that moment, under the vast canopy of stars, with Beck's hand warm around hers, Katherine knew she had found where she belonged. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever threats the Hansens might pose, this was her place now. At Parnell Ranch. With Beck. As summer gave way to fall, life at Parnell Ranch settled into a rhythm that suited Katherine perfectly. The ranch books were now meticulously organized, a system in place that allowed Beck to see at a glance the state of his finances and breeding program. Katherine had also taken over correspondence with clients. her elegant handwriting and proper grammar lending an air of professionalism that had already resulted in several new orders for horses. But Katherine's duties extended beyond the office. She had proven herself adept at various ranch tasks, from helping with the gentler horses to assisting at the birth of a foal. Martha had taught her to make soap, preserve vegetables from the garden, and bake bread that rivaled the older woman's own. In the evenings, she often read aloud while Beck and Martha worked on small repairs or other tasks that could be done by the fire. It was a simpler life than she had known in St. Louis, but Katherine found it deeply satisfying. There was an honesty to the work, a tangible result to her labors that teaching had sometimes lacked, and then there was Beck. Since the night he had told her about Emma, something had shifted between them. Nothing had been spoken aloud, no declarations made, but Katherine was acutely aware of the way his eyes followed her, the brush of his hand against hers when they worked side by side, the way he sought her opinion on matters both large and small. For her part, Katherine found herself thinking of him constantly, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness with the horses, the rare but transformative smile that lit his entire face. She had never felt this way about any man, this mixture of respect, admiration, and a deeper, more unsettling emotion that she wasn't quite ready to name. The Hansons had not returned to the ranch since the night Katherine had shot off Elijah's hat, but their presence loomed over Copper Creek like a dark cloud. According to Deputy Riley, who rode out regularly to check on them, the Hansons' new establishment, the Silver Lady, they called it, was set to open at the end of September. Rumors abounded about the women who would work there, most of them brought in from Denver or San Francisco, likely under false pretenses similar to those that had lured Katherine to Copper Creek. One crisp October morning, Katherine was in the barn, helping Beck groom Sunflower, whose pregnancy was now visibly advanced. The mare had developed a particular fondness for Katherine, nickering softly whenever she approached. "She's getting close," Beck observed, running a practiced hand over the mare's swollen belly. "Another month, I'd say. Will she be all right out in the pasture? It's getting colder at night," Katherine asked, concern evident in her voice. Beck smiled at her protectiveness. "We'll move her to the foaling stall next week, just to be safe. First-time mothers sometimes need extra attention." Their hands brushed as they both reached to check Sunflower's foreleg, and Katherine felt that now familiar jolt of awareness. She glanced up to find Beck watching her, his blue eyes intent. "Kate," he began, but whatever he was about to say was interrupted by the sound of a horse approaching at speed. They exchanged worried glances. No one rode that fast to deliver good news. Hurrying out of the barn, they found Deputy Riley dismounting, his expression grave. "Tom, what's happened?" Beck asked, striding forward to meet him. "It's the Hansons," Riley said, catching his breath. "They've gone too far this time." There was a girl couldn't have been more than 16 who tried to leave the Silver Lady last night. Said she'd been brought there under false pretenses, thought she was going to be working as a housekeeper. Katherine felt a chill run down her spine, remembering how close she had come to a similar fate. "What happened?" she asked, dreading the answer. Riley's face hardened. "Elijah Hanson made an example of her, beat her so badly Doc Miller wasn't sure she'd make it through the night." "My God," Katherine whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "She did survive," Riley continued. "But just barely. Sheriff's finally had enough. He's issued warrants for the Hansons' arrest, assault, kidnapping, running a house of ill repute, you name it." "About time," Beck muttered. "But that doesn't explain why you're here, Tom. The Hansons aren't our problem anymore if the sheriff's finally doing his job." Riley's expression grew even more serious. "That's just it, Beck. The Hansons got word of the warrants somehow. They've fled town, but before they left, Elijah was heard making threats. Said he had unfinished business with you and Miss Zimmerman." Beck's face darkened. "You think they're headed here?" It wasn't a question, but Riley nodded anyway. "Sheriff's organizing a posse, but it'll take time." "I rode ahead to warn you." "How many?" Beck asked, already moving toward the house, Katherine and Riley following. All 3 brothers for sure, probably their cousins and some hired guns. 8, maybe 10 in all, Beck cursed under his breath. We need to get ready. Tom, how long do we have? They left town about an hour before me, but they were gathering supplies and they'll move more slowly as a group. 2 hours, maybe 3. Inside, they found Martha already preparing, shotgun in hand. I heard, she said grimly, been watching from the window. How many are we expecting? While Beck filled Martha in on the details, Katherine's mind raced. The ranch house was sturdy, but it wasn't built to withstand a determined attack, and they were outnumbered, even with Deputy Riley's help. We should send for Miguel and Joaquin, Katherine suggested. They're loyal and they know how to handle themselves. Beck nodded approvingly. Good thinking. Tom, if you're up for another ride, I'll go, Riley said immediately. The brothers live on the edge of town. I can be there and back in an hour if I push it. Take my mare, Beck said. She's the fastest we've got. As Riley departed, Beck turned to Katherine and Martha. We need to prepare the house. Shutters closed and barred, furniture against the doors, water and food stockpiled in case this turns into a siege. For the next hour, they worked feverishly to secure the ranch house. Beck brought in additional weapons and ammunition from the barn, positioning them strategically throughout the house. Martha prepared bandages and medicinal supplies, grimly efficient. Katherine helped wherever she was needed, trying to ignore the cold knot of fear in her stomach. As they worked, Beck kept close to Katherine, his presence both reassuring and distracting. There was an intensity to him now, a focused energy that reminded her that beneath his quiet demeanor lay a man who had survived the harsh realities of the West. You should hide, he told her as they barricaded one of the windows. When they come, the root cellar would be safest. Katherine shook her head firmly. I'm not hiding, Beck. This is my home too now, and I'll defend it alongside you and Martha. Kate, he began, his voice tight with worry, but she cut him off. I'm not Emma, she said gently. I know you want to protect me, but I'm not helpless. I can shoot, I can think quickly, and I'm not running away from a fight that's partly my own making. Beck's expression softened, a mix of concern and pride in his eyes. No, you're definitely not helpless, he conceded. But Kate, if anything happened to you, nothing's going to happen to me, she assured him with more confidence than she felt. We're going to get through this, all of us. Before Beck could respond, Martha called from the front of the house. Riders coming, at least 6 of them moving fast. Beck and Katherine exchanged one last look, a look that spoke volumes about feelings still unvoiced, before hurrying to join Martha at the front window. Through a gap in the shutters, Katherine could see the approaching riders. Even at a distance, she recognized Elijah Hansen's bulky form in the lead. The men rode with purpose, guns already drawn, their intentions clear. No sign of Tom and the brothers, Martha observed grimly. We're on our own. Beck positioned himself at one window, rifle ready. Martha, take the side window. Kate, the back door. Don't shoot unless they make a move to enter the house. We're defending ourselves, not starting a war. Katherine took up her position, shotgun in hand, heart pounding. Through the small window in the back door, she could see 2 of the riders circling around to the rear of the house. Trying to surround them, from the front of the house, she heard Elijah Hansen's booming voice. Parnell, come on out and face me like a man. Bring that interfering schoolteacher with you. Go to hell, Hansen, Beck shouted back. You're trespassing on private property? Private property? Hansen laughed, an ugly sound. This won't be your property much longer, Parnell, not when we're done with it or with you. Katherine heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle being fired, followed by the crash of breaking glass. One of the Hansens had shot out a window. Kate, you all right? Beck called. I'm fine, she replied. 2 of them at the back watching the door. The next few minutes were chaos. More shots were fired, some striking the house, others going wide. Beck and Martha returned fire sparingly, aiming to keep the attackers at bay rather than hit them. Then Katherine saw one of the men at the back making a dash for the door, a bundle in his arms. With a start, she realized it was an oil lamp he intended to set the house on fire. Without hesitation, Katherine raised the shotgun and fired. The man went down with a cry, the lamp shattering harmlessly on the ground beside him. "Kate," Beck called, alarm in his voice. "One tried to set fire to the house," she called back. "I stopped him." There was a moment of shocked silence from outside, then Elijah Hansen's voice vibrating with rage. "You'll pay for that, you interfering bitch. We're going to burn you all out." Katherine's blood ran cold at the threat. If they succeeded in setting fire to the house, there would be no escape. Just then, a new sound cut through the chaos, hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast from the direction of town. "Beck, it's Tom and the brothers," Martha called out, "and they've brought friends." Katherine risked a glance out the window and saw Deputy Riley leading a group of at least 10 men, including Miguel and Joaquin. Sheriff Davis himself rode among them, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. The Hansens, suddenly finding themselves outnumbered, began to fall back. But Elijah Hansen, consumed by rage and hatred, made one last desperate move. He spurred his horse directly toward the house, firing wildly as he came. Beck stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "Last chance, Hansen, surrender now." Hansen's answer was another shot, this one coming perilously close to Beck's head. In that moment, something snapped within Katherine. The thought of losing Beck, of never telling him what was in her heart, was unbearable. She rushed to his side, shotgun ready. Together, they faced Elijah Hansen's charge. Together, they fired. Hansen toppled from his horse, clutching his shoulder where Beck's bullet had struck him. His own shot went wild, harmlessly embedding itself in the porch railing. The fight went out of the remaining Hansens at the sight of their leader fallen and the arrival of the sheriff's posse. Within minutes, they were surrounded, disarmed, and being bound for the ride back to town. Sheriff Davis himself approached Beck and Katherine, who still stood side by side on the porch. "Parnell," he nodded. "Miss Zimmerman, appears we arrived just in time." "Not quite," Beck said, a hint of pride in his voice as he glanced at Katherine. "Miss Zimmerman had things well in hand." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, taking in Katherine's steady grip on the shotgun and her determined expression. "So I see. Well, madam, I'll need your statement about what happened here today, and about the events in town that led to all this." "Of course, Sheriff," Katherine agreed. "I want to see justice done." As the sheriff's men prepared to transport their prisoners back to town, Katherine found herself momentarily alone with Beck on the porch. The aftermath of danger left her feeling oddly euphoric, aware of every sensation: the crisp autumn air, the warmth of Beck beside her, the knowledge that they had faced death together and survived. "You could have been killed," Beck said quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. "When you came out on the porch just now." "So could you," Katherine pointed out. "I couldn't let you face him alone." Something shifted in Beck's expression, a softening, a surrender to what had been building between them for months. "Kate," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. Katherine smiled, understanding what he couldn't yet say. "I know, Beck. I feel the same." Before he could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. "If you two are quite finished making eyes at each other, there's work to be done. This house is a mess, and we've got a posse to feed before they head back to town." Beck laughed, the sound rich with relief and something else: happiness, Katherine realized. Genuine happiness. "Yes, madam," he said, offering Katherine his arm. "Shall we?" As they followed Martha inside, Beck leaned down to whisper in Katherine's ear. "This conversation isn't over, Kate Zimmerman." "I should hope not, Brayden Beck Parnell," she whispered back. "I should very much hope not." In the days that followed the Hansen attack, Copper Creek buzzed with the news. The 3 Hansen brothers were safely locked in the town jail, along with their cousins and hired guns. The young woman they had beaten so severely was recovering at Doc Miller's house, and the girls who had been brought to the Silver Lady under false pretenses were being helped to return home or find legitimate employment. For their part in exposing the Hansens' criminal enterprise and helping to bring them to justice. Beck and Katherine became something of local heroes. When they rode into town together a week after the attack, Katherine's first return to Copper Creek since the night Beck had rescued her from the saloon, they were met with nods of respect and words of gratitude. Sheriff Davis had taken their statements, assuring them that with the testimony of the injured girl and the other women from the Silver Lady, the Hansons would be facing serious charges. "They'll be seeing the inside of Yuma Prison for a good long while," he told them with satisfaction. Life at the ranch gradually returned to normal. The damage from the attack was repaired, the bullet holes patched, the broken windows replaced. Deputy Riley rode out regularly, partly to update them on the legal proceedings against the Hansons, but mostly, Katherine suspected, because he had developed a fondness for Martha's cooking and sharp-tongued company. Throughout it all, something had changed between Beck and Katherine. There was an awareness, an anticipation that colored every interaction. Their hands lingered when they touched, their gazes held for moments longer than necessary. But neither seemed ready to cross the final threshold between friendship and something more, as if they both feared that naming their feelings might somehow break the delicate balance they had achieved. Until the night Sunflower went into labor. It was late November, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Katherine had been awakened in the pre-dawn hours by Beck's gentle knock on her door. "Kate," he called softly, "it's Sunflower, the foal's coming." Katherine dressed quickly and hurried to the barn, where she found Beck already in the foaling stall, speaking soothingly to the distressed mare. Sunflower was pacing, sweat darkening her golden coat, her sides heaving with contractions. "Is it too early?" Katherine asked anxiously, joining Beck in the straw-covered stall. Beck shook his head. "Right on time, but first foals can be difficult." He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "You don't have to stay, it can be a long process and sometimes messy." Katherine gave him a look that clearly said she wasn't going anywhere. "Tell me what to do." For the next several hours they worked together, helping Sunflower through her labor. Katherine fetched water, rubbed the mare's neck when she grew restless, and followed Beck's quiet instructions. As the pale winter sun rose, painting the barn with soft light, Sunflower finally gave one last massive push and the foal slid into the world. "A filly," Beck announced with quiet joy, quickly clearing the newborn's nose and mouth. "And a beauty." Katherine watched in wonder as the wobbly-legged foal struggled to rise, Sunflower nickering encouragement. There was something miraculous about it, this new life emerging into the world, determined and perfect. When the filly finally gained her feet and found her way to her mother's milk, Beck and Katherine sat back in the straw, exhausted but elated. Without thinking, Katherine leaned against Beck's solid warmth, and his arm came around her, holding her close. "She needs a name," Beck said, his voice soft in Katherine's ear. Katherine considered the golden filly with her white blaze, so like her mother but with her own distinct personality already evident in the determined tilt of her head. "Hope," Katherine suggested. "Her name should be Hope." Beck's arm tightened around her. "Hope," he repeated, "it's perfect." They sat in companionable silence, watching the new mother and foal bond until Beck shifted slightly, turning to face Katherine. "Kate," he began, his voice serious, "there's something I've been wanting to say to you." For a while now, Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "Yes," Beck took a deep breath. "When I found you that night in the saloon, I thought I was just doing what any decent man would do, protecting someone who needed protecting." He smiled ruefully. "I had no idea you'd turn my life upside down." "Is that a complaint, Mr. Parnell?" Katherine asked, trying to keep her tone light despite the emotions welling up within her. "Far from it," Beck assured her. "You've brought order to my accounts, peace to my home, and—" He hesitated, then continued, his voice rough with feeling. "And joy to my heart, Kate. I never thought I'd feel this way again, never thought I'd trust myself to care for someone after what happened to Emma. But you're not someone who needs my protection. You're someone who stands beside me, faces danger with me, makes me laugh, challenges my thinking." Katherine felt tears prickling behind her eyes. Beck, let me finish, he said gently. I love you, Katherine Zimmerman. I love your courage, your intelligence, your compassion. I love the way you handle a shotgun and the way you keep Martha in line. I love watching you with the horses and seeing you bent over the account books with that little frown of concentration. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. A tear slipped down Katherine's cheek as joy bloomed within her. I love you too, Brayden Beck Parnell, with all my heart. Beck reached out, gently brushing away her tear with his thumb. Then, as naturally as breathing, his lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of all the longing, all the unspoken feelings that had been building between them for months. When they finally drew apart, Beck rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Kate, be my wife, my partner in everything. Help me build something lasting here, something that honors the past but looks to the future. Yes, Katherine whispered without hesitation, yes to all of it. Beck's smile was radiant as he pulled her close for another kiss, this one deeper, full of promise and passion. In the stall beside them, Hope took her first few confident steps under her mother's watchful eye, a new beginning in a world full of possibilities. They were married on Christmas Day in the small church in Copper Creek. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, partly out of curiosity about the schoolteacher who had helped bring down the Hansons, but mostly because Beck Parnell was well respected in the community, and people were genuinely happy to see him find love. Martha, resplendent in a new dress she had secretly been working on for weeks, stood proudly beside Katherine. Deputy Riley, who had become a good friend to them all, served as Beck's best man. Even Sheriff Davis attended, his presence a symbol of how much had changed in Copper Creek since the Hansons' arrest. Katherine wore a simple white gown that Martha had helped her sew, with sprigs of dried lavender and rosemary in her dark hair. As she walked down the aisle toward Beck, seeing the love and wonder in his eyes, she couldn't help but think of how far she had come since that terrifying night in the saloon. From a woman alone, beaten and afraid, to a woman loved, respected, and about to begin a new life with the man who had saved her and whom she, in turn, had saved in ways neither of them had expected. "You're beautiful," Beck whispered as she reached him at the altar. "And you're handsome," she whispered back, taking in his freshly trimmed hair and new suit with appreciation. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When they exchanged their vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. And when the minister pronounced them man and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation seemed to shake the very rafters. The celebration afterward, held at the newly reopened saloon, under new management since the Hansons' downfall, was a joyous affair. There was dancing and feasting, laughter and toasts to the happy couple. Katherine, who had once been beaten and humiliated in this very room, now found herself surrounded by well-wishers, accepted and welcomed as Mrs. Brayden Beck Parnell. As the evening wore on, Beck pulled Katherine aside, leading her to a quiet corner away from the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Parnell?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with the smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "And you, Mr. Parnell, any regrets about rescuing a troublesome schoolteacher from a saloon brawl?" Beck's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Only that I didn't do it sooner." His expression grew more serious. "I have something for you, a wedding present." From his pocket, he withdrew a folded document which he placed in Katherine's hands. "What's this?" she asked, unfolding it curiously. "The deed to the ranch," Beck explained. "I had it changed at the land office yesterday. It now lists both our names. Parnell Ranch belongs to both of us, Kate." Equally? Katherine stared at the document, overwhelmed by the significance of what he had done. In a time when married women rarely owned property in their own right, Beck had chosen to make her his true partner in every sense. "Beck, I don't know what to say," she managed, tears threatening again. "You don't need to say anything," he assured her. "But there's one more thing." He nodded toward the door where Martha stood with a knowing smile. Our carriage awaits, Mrs. Parnell. I think it's time we said our goodbyes. The ride back to their ranch was filled with anticipation. Katherine, nestled against Beck's side in the carriage, found herself both nervous and eager for what was to come. They had waited by mutual agreement for their wedding night, though there had been plenty of passionate moments in the weeks leading up to the ceremony. When they arrived, Beck surprised her by scooping her into his arms to carry her over the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Parnell," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. Katherine was about to respond when she noticed the changes. The room was illuminated by dozens of candles, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Fresh pine boughs decorated the mantel, their scent mingling with the spicy aroma of the mulled cider keeping warm on the stove. A fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace, warding off the winter chill. Martha, Katherine guessed, touched by the older woman's thoughtfulness. Beck nodded, a smile playing at his lips. She said every bride deserves a proper welcome, even if the groom is a hopeless romantic fool who wouldn't know a nice gesture if it bit him on the behind. Katherine laughed, picturing Martha's exact expression as she delivered that assessment. "We're lucky to have her. We're lucky to have each other," Beck corrected, drawing her into his arms. His expression grew serious as he gazed down at her. "I never thought I'd find this, Kate. Never thought I deserved it after failing Emma." Katherine placed her hand against his cheek. "You didn't fail her, Beck, and she would be happy to see you happy now." She rose on tiptoe to brush her lips against his. "I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you know just how deserving you are of love and happiness." Beck's response was to kiss her deeply, passionately, all the longing and desire they had been holding in check finally unleashed. Katherine melted against him, her arms twining around his neck as she returned his kiss with equal fervor. "Kate," Beck murmured against her lips, his voice husky with need. "Are you sure? We can wait if you're not ready." In answer, Katherine took his hand and led him toward their bedroom, no longer his alone, but theirs together. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Brayden Beck Parnell. The winter passed in a haze of newlywed bliss for Beck and Katherine. They settled into a rhythm of work and togetherness that suited them perfectly. During the day, they tended to the ranch, Beck working with the horses, Katherine maintaining the books and correspondence. In the evenings, they shared meals with Martha, played cards or read aloud by the fire, and retired early to their bedroom, where they continued to discover new depths to their love for each other. Christmas had brought a light dusting of snow to Copper Creek, unusual for the region but welcomed by Katherine, who had missed the white Christmases of her childhood in St. Louis. By February, however, the weather had turned mild, with hints of an early spring in the air. It was during this time that Katherine began to suspect a change in her body. At first, she dismissed the morning queasiness and unusual fatigue as the result of a busy schedule. But when her monthly cycle failed to appear for the second time, she could no longer deny the possibility. She confirmed her suspicions with a visit to Doc Miller in town, making the trip with Martha while Beck was away delivering a pair of horses to a buyer in a neighboring settlement. "Congratulations, Mrs. Parnell," the doctor told her with a smile. "I'd say you're about 2 months along. The baby should arrive in late summer, perhaps August." Martha, who had insisted on accompanying Katherine into the examination room, let out a whoop of joy that was most uncharacteristic of her usual reserved demeanor. "A baby," she exclaimed. "Oh, Beck's going to be over the moon." Katherine felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was thrilled at the prospect of creating a family with Beck, of seeing him as a father. But childbirth in the West was still a dangerous undertaking, and her own mother had died bringing her into the world. Doc Miller, seeing her expression, patted her hand reassuringly. "You're young and healthy, Mrs. Parnell. I've delivered hundreds of babies in my time, and I expect yours will come into the world just fine." Katherine nodded, trying to push aside her fears. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate your confidence." On the ride back to the ranch, Martha seemed unable to contain her excitement, making plans for converting the small room next to the main bedroom into a nursery, discussing patterns for baby clothes, and speculating on whether the child would favor Beck or Katherine. "Martha," Katherine finally interrupted with a laugh, "I haven't even told Beck yet." Martha had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Well, you'd better do it soon, girl. He'll be home tomorrow, and I don't know if I can keep this to myself for long." Katherine spent that evening planning how to share the news with Beck. She wanted the moment to be special, a memory they could treasure in years to come. In the end, simplicity won out. When Beck returned the following afternoon, tired but pleased with the successful delivery and payment for the horses, Katherine met him at the barn as he was unsaddling his mount. "Welcome home," she greeted him, rising on tiptoe for a kiss. "I've missed you." Beck's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close. "I've missed you too. The buyer tried to convince me to stay another day, but I couldn't bear to be away any longer." He studied her face, a slight frown creasing his brow. "You look different somehow. Are you feeling all right?" Katherine smiled, touched by his concern and perceptiveness. "I feel wonderful, actually, but there is something I need to tell you." Taking his hand, she placed it gently on her still flat abdomen. "We're going to have a baby, Beck, in August." For a moment, Beck stood frozen, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, slowly, wonder spread across his features, followed by a joy so pure it took Katherine's breath away. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby," Katherine nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Our baby." With a whoop that rivaled Martha's, Beck swept Katherine into his arms, spinning her around in the middle of the barn while the horses looked on with mild interest. "Beck," Katherine laughed. "Put me down. I'm supposed to avoid excitement." Immediately, Beck set her on her feet, his expression comically shifting to concern. "I'm sorry, did I hurt you?" "Is the baby? We're both fine," Katherine assured him, touched by his instant protectiveness. "But perhaps we could celebrate a bit more sedately." Beck's answer was to kiss her, pouring all his joy and love into the gesture. When they finally drew apart, he kept his arms around her, as if unable to let her go. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "You've given me everything, Kate, purpose, partnership, and now a family of our own." "We've given each other those things," Katherine corrected gently, "and there's one more piece of news." Beck raised an eyebrow, his expression curious. "More surprises." "I've been offered the position of schoolteacher in Copper Creek," Katherine revealed. "A real position this time. The town council approached me when they heard about my background. Apparently, with the Hansons gone, Copper Creek is trying to become more respectable, attract families. They're converting one of the buildings that used to belong to the Hansons into a proper schoolhouse." Beck's expression was one of pride mixed with concern. "That's wonderful, Kate. You'd be an exceptional teacher, but with the baby coming." "I've thought of that," Katherine assured him. "The school won't be ready until September after the baby is born. And I've negotiated for shorter hours, at least initially, so I can be home with our child as much as possible." She hesitated. "But if you don't want me to, Kate," Beck interrupted, cupping her face in his hands. "If this is what you want, then I support you completely. You were born to teach, to shape young minds. I would never ask you to give up that part of yourself." Katherine felt a rush of gratitude for this man who understood her so well, who valued her independence and abilities even as he cherished and protected her. "I love you, Brayden Beck Parnell," she said simply. "And I love you, Katherine Zimmerman Parnell," he replied. "Both of you." The news of the baby spread quickly through Copper Creek, bringing a flurry of well wishes and gifts from townspeople who had come to respect the Parnells. Deputy Riley, who had been a frequent visitor to the ranch since the confrontation with the Hansons, seemed particularly delighted by the news. "A baby," he exclaimed when told. "Well now, that's something to celebrate." Katherine noticed with interest that his gaze kept straying to Martha as he spoke, and that the usually sharp-tongued housekeeper seemed almost flustered by his attention. There was a story there, she thought with amusement, one that might unfold in its own time. As spring blossomed into summer, Catherine's body changed with the seasons. Her slender form rounded, her dresses needing Martha's skilled alterations to accommodate her growing belly. Beck was attentive to the point of hovering, insisting she rest frequently and take on fewer responsibilities around the ranch. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," Katherine protested one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from helping with the new foals. "Humor me," Beck replied, his expression a mixture of concern and adoration. "I just want to keep you both safe." Katherine softened at that. How could she argue with such love in July? With the baby's arrival only weeks away, they received unexpected news from the East. A letter arrived from a law firm in Boston, addressed to Mrs. Katherine Zimmerman Parnell. "What is it?" Beck asked, seeing Katherine's shocked expression as she read. "It's from my father's lawyer," she said, her voice faint with disbelief. "Apparently my father had investments I knew nothing about, railroad stocks primarily. They've matured, and as his sole heir." She looked up at Beck, her eyes wide. "Beck, he's left me nearly $10,000. Beck whistled low. "That's a considerable sum." Katherine nodded, still trying to absorb the news. "The lawyer says he's been trying to locate me for over a year. When he read about the Hansen trial in a newspaper that mentioned my name and Copper Creek, he finally tracked me down. What will you do with it?" Beck asked, no hint of possessiveness or entitlement in his voice, just genuine curiosity. Katherine considered for a moment. "Some should be set aside for the baby's education, of course, and perhaps we could expand the ranch. You've talked about breeding more horses, building a larger barn." Beck smiled, shaking his head in wonder. Most women would be thinking of fine dresses and trips to San Francisco, not ranch expansions. "I'm not most women," Katherine reminded him with a smile. "Besides, this is our life, our future. I want to invest in it, in us." August arrived with blazing heat that left Katherine uncomfortable and restless. She had never been so huge, so unwieldy, so eager for her body to be her own again. Yet at the same time, she marveled at the life growing within her, the strong kicks and movements that reminded her of the miracle taking place. On the evening of August 10th, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, Katherine felt the first contraction while she was helping Martha prepare dinner. It was a sharp, insistent pain that took her breath away. "Martha," she gasped, clutching the edge of the table. "I think it's time." What followed was a long night of labor, with Beck pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door while Martha and the midwife from town attended to Katherine. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Katherine felt oddly powerful, connected to generations of women who had gone through this most fundamental of human experiences. As dawn broke over the hills surrounding Parnell Ranch, Emma Katherine Parnell made her entrance into the world, announcing her arrival with a lusty cry that brought tears to her exhausted mother's eyes. "Let Beck in," Katherine told the midwife. "Let him meet his daughter." Beck entered the room with trepidation, his face drawn with worry from the long night of listening to Katherine's labor. But at the sight of her propped up in bed, tired but radiant, with a tiny bundle in her arms, his expression transformed to wonder. "Beck," Katherine said softly, "meet your daughter, Emma Katherine Parnell." At the name, Beck's eyes filled with tears. "Emma," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Is that all right?" Katherine asked, suddenly uncertain. "I thought it's perfect," Beck assured her, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed to take in the tiny face of his daughter. "She's perfect. You're perfect. I love you both so much." As Beck gently took his daughter into his arms for the first time, his large hands cradling her with infinite tenderness, Katherine felt a sense of completion, of rightness. From that terrible night in the saloon had come this love, family, purpose, home. As if sensing her thoughts, Beck looked up from their daughter's face to meet Katherine's gaze. "Thank you," he said simply. Katherine smiled, understanding all that those two words encompassed. "No, Beck, thank you for drawing your gun that night, for taking me away, for everything that followed." Outside, the sun continued to rise over Parnell Ranch, illuminating a new day, a new life, and all the promise it held. Years passed, seasons turning one into another with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Parnell Ranch flourished under Beck and Katherine's joint stewardship. The inheritance from Katherine's father allowed them to expand their operations, building a larger barn, increasing their breeding stock, and hiring additional hands. Their reputation for quality horses spread throughout the territory and beyond, bringing buyers from as far away as San Francisco and Denver. Little Emma grew into a spirited, intelligent child with her mother's green eyes and her father's quiet determination. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Thomas James Parnell, a sturdy boy with a natural affinity for horses and his father's startling blue eyes. Katherine's school in Copper Creek became a source of pride for the community. Starting with just 12 students in that first September after Emma's birth, it had grown to over 30 children of various ages. Katherine's progressive teaching methods, once considered controversial in St. Louis, found a more receptive audience in the West, where practical knowledge and independence were valued traits. She balanced her teaching duties with motherhood and her role on the ranch with a grace that sometimes left Beck in awe. Though there were difficult days, moments of exhaustion and frustration, Katherine thrived on the full life they had built together. Martha remained an integral part of their family, though she had eventually moved into the foreman's cabin, citing the need for peace and quiet away from those noisy youngsters. Everyone knew the real reason was to make room for Deputy Riley, who had finally gathered the courage to court her properly. They had married in a quiet ceremony when Emma was 3, but Tom continued to serve as deputy in town while Martha maintained her role at the ranch, the arrangement suiting them both perfectly. As for the Hansons, they had indeed been sentenced to lengthy terms at Yuma Prison. Copper Creek had flourished in their absence, transforming from a rough frontier town to a growing community with a church, school, and legitimate businesses. The Silver Lady had been converted into a respectable hotel, its dark past almost forgotten. On the 10th anniversary of the night Beck had rescued Katherine from the saloon, they held a celebration at the ranch. Friends from town joined them: Sheriff Davis, now semi-retired, Martha and Tom, Miguel and Joaquin, who had become partners in the ranch, and many others whose lives had intertwined with theirs over the years. As twilight fell, Beck found Katherine standing alone on the porch, watching their children play with the other youngsters in the yard. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Parnell," he said, slipping his arm around her waist. Katherine leaned into him, savoring the familiar strength and warmth of his embrace. "I was just thinking about how different my life might have been if you hadn't walked into that saloon that night." Beck's arm tightened around her. "I don't like to think about that." "Nor do I," Katherine admitted. "But then I look at our children, at our home, at everything we've built together, and I can't help but marvel at how something so beautiful came from such an ugly beginning." Beck turned her in his arms to face him. At 45, he was still handsome, the years adding distinguished silver at his temples and lines of character to his face. "No regrets, then, about any of it," Katherine smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. At 36, she too had changed. Motherhood and life on the ranch had added strength to her slender frame and confidence to her bearing. But her eyes still held the same intelligence and spirit that had captivated Beck from the beginning. "Not a single one," she assured him. "Except perhaps that I didn't shoot Elijah Hanson's hat off sooner." Beck laughed, the sound still able to warm Katherine's heart after all these years. "You know, I never did tell you how impressive that was. I half fell in love with you right then and there." "Only half," Katherine teased. "Well, the other half was already well on its way," Beck admitted. "From the moment you stood up to those men in the saloon, refusing to be cowed even when injured." Katherine's expression softened. "It seems we've both been falling in love with each other for a very long time." "And I intend to keep falling for at least another 50 years, Beck promised, lowering his head to kiss her with a tenderness that still held passion after a decade of marriage. From the yard came the sound of their children's laughter, bright and clear in the evening air. Inside the house, their friends and extended family continued the celebration, voices raised in conversation and occasional song. This was the life they had built together, Katherine thought as she returned Beck's kiss. A life that had begun in violence and fear, but had transformed into something beautiful through love, courage, and determination. A true partnership forged in the Wild West, as enduring as the land itself. And it had all started with a woman beaten by strangers at a saloon, and a cowboy who drew his gun and took her away.